Hi, everybody. This is Carol. This is week 5, and this is my initial post. We had a great assignment, which was to review a TED Talk. I also like TED Talks. I find them either really interesting or very inspirational. And the one that I listened to this week, which is called How Schools Kill Creativity by Sir Ken Robinson, was very inspirational. Robinson talked to an audience of what I would presume to be educators, and he talked about how educational systems are designed to educate just the head and not the whole body. He talked about the hierarchy of education where math, languages, and humanities are at the top, and on the bottom of the hierarchy is the arts. And even within the arts, there's a hierarchy where music and fine art are at the top, and then the arts of, say, dance and drama are at the very bottom. So even within the arts, those that incorporate the whole body are still at the bottom. He says that school systems were developed this way because of the Industrial Revolution, and he said that they were based on two fallacies. That businesses needed those skills, math and language, for business. Now, that's not the fallacy, but he said that those may have been the most useful skills at that time, but that he doesn't really feel that they're the most useful skills now, that that's one of the fallacies. And he also said it's built on the fallacy that academic ability is a sign of intelligence. And he said that he does not think that just because someone is not good in math or language, for instance, that that's a sign that they don't have good intelligence or higher levels of intelligence. So he talks a lot about the brain, and he talks about education and intelligence, but he doesn't give a lot of facts about that. He doesn't go into a lot of science about it. But he does encourage his biggest point is that creativity is important. And he talks about the fact that kids who are entering the educational system this year will not retire, I think he said, until 2065. And so there's no way to know what their needs are going to be, and or even to know what the needs of the workforce are going to be in even 5 years. And so he feels that it's short-sighted in our educational systems to not develop creativity and to not encourage that in students. And so he said that the only way for the educational system to survive is to enhance it through a creative education and to allow students to explore their intelligences through multiple intelligences, which would be multisensory, tactile, kinesthetic, auditory, visual, etc. I would say that he was entertaining and inspirational, and so I'd give his presentation an 8. I think that if you want to be entertained, he was quite entertaining. He had lots of anecdotal instances and funny stories just from his own life that really didn't even have anything to do with the presentation, but that were just entertaining. And again, I thought he was very inspirational. Um, would this change the way I taught? And I would say my response to that would be yes and no. And so I'm going to go off script for this because I want to tell you how this has affected me personally and professionally, because this is something that I was actually familiar with. I was a classroom teacher, as most of you have known, but I also worked for a church for about 10 years, and my job was to educate about 100 elementary students every week through curriculum that was multisensory. I developed the curriculum, I did the teaching, I oversaw volunteers that did teaching as well. And what we did was we taught through a multisensory approach. So we played games, we told stories, we cooked, we danced, we sang, we did art. We used computers, we used video, we used all of those things, and it worked. Kids learned what we were teaching. They remembered what we were teaching, and it spoke to a lot of different kids. They were engaged, and it was very successful. It was very satisfying. I felt like they had fun, and part of the reason that they learned was because they were having fun. The problem was that they weren't required to be there, and I didn't have to give them any tests, although I did give them little quizzes as in the form of games. And there was no Common Core curriculum. There was no assessment. There wasn't a teacher waiting at the other end to say, well, they didn't really learn that the way they were supposed to learn that, or I expected them to have this set of skills when they got to the next level. And so from that standpoint, even though I think that it's a great idea and it's inspirational, I don't know how that would work necessarily in the educational systems that we have. So I think, yes, I would continue to be creative because I like to be creative. I think it inspires me. It kind of gives me, it revs me up. It speaks to the extrovert in me, I guess. It's something, it's a way for me to connect with kids. But there's only a limited amount of time to develop that because you still have to stay on task when you're teaching and you have to cover a certain amount of material. And also, there are kids that don't respond to the dancing and the singing and so on. And so, those are kids that may want to opt out at that time. And so, you can't do all of those things all of the time. The other thing is that this spoke to me personally because he told a story about a girl whose name was Jillian Lynn, who was a student in the 30s. And Jillian was very active in her classroom. And her teacher suggested to her mother, Mrs. Lynn, that she take her to a doctor and have her evaluated because Jillian could just not sit still. So Mrs. Lynn took Jillian to a doctor rather, and the doctor spoke with Jillian and he talked with her, he observed her, and he finally said to Mrs. Lynn, we need to step outside. If you could just come with me, and Jillian, if you'll just wait here. So he turned on his radio when he left the room, and Mrs. Lynn and the doctor went outside the room and they watched Jillian through a window that was in his door. And after they had watched her for a minute or two, they noticed that Jillian was dancing all over the room to the music that was playing on the radio. And the doctor said to Mrs. Lynn, well, Mrs. Lynn, your daughter is not ill. Your daughter is a dancer. You need to take her to a dancing school. So fortunately for Jillian, she was allowed to go to a dancing school, and from that she became part of the Royal Ballet. And Robinson told us that then she also went on to become the choreographer for Cats and Phantom of the Opera. And so that's one of those wow, wonderful stories for this young girl who had probably ADHD and found her gift and was able to channel it and become successful not only in happiness but monetarily. And wouldn't every teacher like to be able to do that for those kids that can't sit still? You know, and I have a daughter who's like that, and it would have been great for her to have had the opportunity to find in the educational system something that spoke to her besides paper and pencil and testing and all of the assessments that we have. And so, yes, she did love creative things that were done, and she did like being in art class, and she did like being in music because those are things that used energy. But I, again, think that I got a lot of inspiration from watching the video, and it would encourage me to do that in my classroom. But within the parameters of our educational system, I don't know that I can break out other than just trying to do what I can on an individual basis. So I'd be interested to hear your reaction to this. We talked about this a couple weeks ago about using bells and whistles and how much should we do and what should we do for individuals. And I know that this may be a hot topic, so I'll be interested to hear what your TED Talks were about and what you have to say too. Talk to you later.